She interrupted a strategy meeting with a detail everyone missed, and the Mafia Boss ordered the room to listen. Mia Harper had never felt more out of place. She stood at the back of the room, the floor-to-ceiling windows framing a sprawling cityscape. The conference room was buzzing with the sharp voices of men in expensive suits, each one a player in a world she could barely comprehend. She was just the maid, there to fetch coffee, clean up crumbs, and stay out of the way. But today, something was different. As the Mafia Boss, Victor Romano, sat at the head of the table, the room fell into a momentary hush. He was tall, with dark eyes that seemed to pierce through everyone in the room, calculating and commanding. His presence alone was enough to make the air feel thick, heavy with unspoken power. Mia had worked in his mansion for months, invisible to everyone, always keeping her head down and doing her job. But this time, her attention was caught by a detail no one else had noticed. She stood frozen, the weight of the moment pressing against her chest. The meeting was supposed to be about new business ventures, expansions, profits, high-stakes deals, but as the conversation droned on, Mia realized something wasn't right. A subtle detail in the financial projections, a figure that didn't add up. She hesitated, unsure if she should speak. In a room full of ruthless businessmen, what could she possibly have to say? But the thought of her mother's mounting medical bills, her own struggles to keep a roof over her head, pushed her forward. She stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "Excuse me, but there's an error in the projection." The room fell silent. Eyes turned toward her, a mix of confusion and disdain in their gazes. Victor Romano's cold eyes locked onto hers. His expression didn't change, but there was something calculating in the way he studied her. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice low, but laced with an authority that made Mia's pulse race. "There's an error in the projections," she repeated, her voice steadier now. She pointed to the chart on the screen, highlighting the discrepancy. "If this is the plan, it will lead to significant losses. I've seen similar numbers before. They are off." The room shifted. The murmurs of disbelief started, but no one spoke up. Everyone seemed to be waiting for Victor's reaction. Mia could feel her heart pounding in her chest. She had crossed a line, and she didn't know if she would be met with a harsh rebuke or worse. But to her surprise, Victor Romano stood up slowly, his gaze never leaving her. He looked at the room full of executives, then back at Mia. "Everyone," he said, his voice booming. "Listen to what she has to say." The shock in the room was palpable. Mia had never been seen, let alone heard, in a room like this. But now, Victor's command rang out, and all eyes were on her. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife, but Mia took a deep breath, knowing she had the attention of the most powerful man in the room. As she explained the numbers in detail, the once dismissive gazes of the executives softened. Some even leaned forward, taking notes. Victor stood silent, observing, his expression unreadable. Mia could feel the weight of his eyes, not judging her this time, but waiting. The meeting continued, but it was clear that Mia had just altered the course of things. She had interrupted the most important meeting of her life, and the Mafia Boss had ordered everyone to listen. I know that Mia Harper was not the type of person who usually stood out in a room full of powerful people. In fact, she had spent the better part of her career working in silence, blending into the background of the high-stakes world of the Romano family. But as she stood there, in front of the conference room, with all eyes now fixed on her, she could feel her heart beating wildly in her chest. The tension was thick in the air, like it could be cut with a knife. Her breath came in short, controlled bursts as she took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. This moment was surreal, and yet, it felt as though it was meant to happen. As she pointed to the financial projections on the screen, explaining the error that no one had noticed, the once dismissive murmurs in the room faded into silence. Even the Mafia Boss, Victor Romano, who had long been an enigma of power and control, stood motionless, watching her intently. She had interrupted his important strategy meeting with nothing but the quiet certainty of someone who knew the truth. His gaze never wavered as she spoke. The way he looked at her was different from before. He wasn't angry. He wasn't irritated. There was something in his eyes that Mia couldn't quite place, something akin to respect. She continued, her words coming out more confidently with each passing second. "If this error is not corrected, we'll be facing significant losses," she said, pointing to the flawed projections on the screen. The numbers don't match up, and the consequences could be catastrophic. She was suddenly very aware of how many people were listening to her, but she didn't let it throw her off. She had worked too hard, too long, to get this far. She wasn't about to back down now. For the first time in months, Mia felt like she was more than just the invisible maid. She was someone who mattered, someone who had something to offer. And Victor Romano, despite his stoic exterior, was paying attention. She noticed the subtle shift in the room as the other executives began to look at her differently. Their expressions had softened. The skepticism that had been so evident earlier was now replaced with curiosity. As she explained the numbers and the risks involved, the tension in the room began to dissolve, replaced by the quiet hum of agreement. It was as if they were finally seeing her for what she truly was, more than just a housekeeper. Her insight, her sharp mind, was something they couldn't ignore. But as Mia wrapped up her explanation, she noticed something even more remarkable. Victor Romano, the man who controlled everything with a mere word, stepped forward. The room felt even quieter. His voice, though low, commanded immediate attention. "You've made your point," he said, his gaze still locked on Mia. "We'll revisit this, and I expect the corrected projections on my desk by the end of the day." There was no anger in his tone, no bitterness, just an acknowledgement that her words had made an impact. "Thank you, Mia," he added, his voice softer now, but still commanding. "You've done well." Mia's breath hitched at the sound of her name, spoken with a level of respect that was completely foreign to her. She had expected a harsh reprimand, maybe even dismissal for daring to speak up, but instead, Victor Romano had praised her. In a room full of powerful men, in front of a man who could make or break anyone with a single word, she had earned her place. And that, more than anything, was what took her breath away. She stood there, momentarily stunned, as the rest of the room started to murmur their agreement. She had not just made her mark, she had changed the course of the meeting. No one would ever look at her the same way again. As Mia turned to leave the room, she could feel the weight of her actions settle in. She had interrupted a Mafia Boss's meeting. She had stood up and been heard. And she wasn't going to let anyone forget it. As the door closed behind her, she took a moment to compose herself. For the first time, she felt like she had truly stepped into her own power. And as she walked down the hallway, she couldn't help but smile to herself. The world she had known, one of silence and invisibility, had just shifted, and she was ready for whatever came next. I know that Mia Harper was not the type of person who usually stood out in a room full of powerful people. In fact, she had spent the better part of her career working in silence, blending into the background of the high-stakes world of the Romano family. But as she stood there, in front of the conference room, with all eyes now fixed on her, she could feel her heart beating wildly in her chest. The tension was thick in the air, like it could be cut with a knife. Her breath came in short, controlled bursts as she took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. This moment was surreal, and yet, it felt as though it was meant to happen. As she pointed to the financial projections on the screen, explaining the error that no one had noticed, the once dismissive murmurs in the room faded into silence. Even the Mafia Boss, Victor Romano, who had long been an enigma of power and control, stood motionless, watching her intently. She had interrupted his important strategy meeting with nothing but the quiet certainty of someone who knew the truth. His gaze never wavered as she spoke. The way he looked at her was different from before. He wasn't angry. He wasn't irritated. There was something in his eyes that Mia couldn't quite place, something akin to respect. She continued, her words coming out more confidently with each passing second. "If this error is not corrected, we'll be facing significant losses," she said, pointing to the flawed projections on the screen. "The numbers don't match up, and the consequences could be catastrophic." She was suddenly very aware of how many people were listening to her, but she didn't let it throw her off. She had worked too hard, too long, to get this far. She wasn't about to back down now. For the first time in months, Mia felt like she was more than just the invisible maid. She was someone who mattered, someone who had something to offer. And Victor Romano, despite his stoic exterior, was paying attention. She noticed the subtle shift in the room as the other executives began to look at her differently. Their expressions had softened. The skepticism that had been so evident earlier was now replaced with curiosity. As she explained the numbers and the risks involved, the tension in the room began to dissolve, replaced by the quiet hum of agreement. It was as if they were finally seeing her for what she truly was, more than just a housekeeper. Her insight, her sharp mind, was something they couldn't ignore. But as Mia wrapped up her explanation, she noticed something even more remarkable. Victor Romano, the man who controlled everything with a mere word, stepped forward. The room felt even quieter. His voice, though low, commanded immediate attention. "You've made your point," he said, his gaze still locked on Mia. "We'll revisit this, and I expect the corrected projections on my desk by the end of the day." There was no anger in his tone, no bitterness, just an acknowledgement that her words had made an impact. "Thank you, Mia," he added, his voice softer now, but still commanding. "You've done well." Mia's breath hitched at the sound of her name, spoken with a level of respect that was completely foreign to her. She had expected a harsh reprimand, maybe even dismissal for daring to speak up, but instead, Victor Romano had praised her. In a room full of powerful men, in front of a man who could make or break anyone with a single word, she had earned her place. And that, more than anything, was what took her breath away. She stood there, momentarily stunned, as the rest of the room started to murmur their agreement. She had not just made her mark, she had changed the course of the meeting. No one would ever look at her the same way again. As Mia turned to leave the room, she could feel the weight of her actions settle in. She had interrupted a Mafia Boss's meeting. She had stood up and been heard. And she wasn't going to let anyone forget it. As the door closed behind her, she took a moment to compose herself. For the first time, she felt like she had truly stepped into her own power. And as she walked down the hallway, she couldn't help but smile to herself. The world she had known, one of silence and invisibility, had just shifted, and she was ready for whatever came next. Mia Harper had never imagined herself in this position, standing outside Victor Romano's office, hands trembling, unsure of what would come next. But as the day went on, she realized something incredible. She had earned her place in this world. Her role as a maid, the one she had taken for granted, had suddenly transformed into something much bigger. Mia had disrupted the Mafia Boss's strategy meeting, and now she was about to witness the consequences of her actions. It had been hours since the meeting, and Victor had not spoken to her again until now. She had gone back to her usual duties, cleaning the halls and organizing the rooms, but the weight of the day still sat heavily on her shoulders. Her mind kept returning to the moment when Victor had called her out in front of everyone, when he had actually praised her. No one had ever treated her with that kind of respect before. She hadn't expected that she would ever be seen in the way Victor Romano saw her. After all, she was just a maid, someone people walked past without a second glance. But that day, she had disrupted their world, and the world had to adjust to her. As she cleaned the hallway outside Victor's office, the door suddenly swung open. She froze. There he was, standing in the doorway, his presence as commanding as ever. His dark eyes met hers, and for the first time, she didn't look away. He raised an eyebrow, as though noticing the change in her. "Mia," Victor said, his voice calm, but with an underlying edge. That sent a chill down her spine. "Come in." The command was quiet, but it left no room for hesitation. Mia took a deep breath and stepped forward, entering his office. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she was certain that whatever happened next would be pivotal. The room was dimly lit, a soft light from the desk lamp casting shadows on the walls. Victor was sitting at his desk, his posture relaxed, but there was something in his eyes that told Mia this wasn't a casual conversation. "Sit down," he instructed, motioning to the chair across from him. Mia obeyed, her heart pounding in her chest. She tried to steady herself, but the nerves were hard to ignore. She had never been in a situation like this before. She had always been invisible, always the one in the background. Now, she was here, facing the man who ran it all. "You did well today," Victor said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "I didn't expect you to catch that mistake. Most people would have let it slide, but you didn't. That's impressive." Mia didn't know how to respond. She had always been afraid of speaking out, afraid of drawing attention to herself. But today, something had been different. I saw the numbers didn't add up," she said quietly, unsure of why she felt the need to explain. Victor smiled, a small, almost imperceptible curve of his lips. "You're smarter than you let on," he said, his voice low and thoughtful. "And I'm starting to think that maybe you could be more than just a maid." Mia blinked, unsure of what he meant. What did he mean by that? Was he offering her something? Or was it just a passing comment? I've been thinking, Victor continued, his gaze never leaving hers, that you could do more than what you're doing now. You're more capable than you realize. I'd like to see what you're really capable of. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Mia wasn't sure if she had heard him correctly. Did he just offer her a position in his world? A world that, until now, she had only ever seen from the sidelines? You mean more than this? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Victor nodded slowly, his expression serious. I think you could be of value to me. You've proven yourself today, but it's not just about your mind, Mia. It's about your loyalty, your ability to see things others miss. I need someone like you in my circle. Mia's breath caught in her throat. She had never imagined this. To think that she, the maid who had been invisible for so long, could actually have a place in the world of power and influence. But Victor wasn't finished. I want you to think about it, he said, standing up and walking toward the window, his hands clasped behind his back. You can continue doing what you've always done. But if you choose to stay, I'll make sure you never have to worry about anything again. You'll be part of something much bigger. Mia sat in stunned silence, trying to process what he had just said. Her mind raced. She had always dreamed of a better life, but she never imagined it would come like this. Would she dare to step into the world Victor was offering her? Was she ready to leave behind the life she knew and take a chance on something unknown? Victor turned to look at her, his gaze intense. Take your time. But know this, Mia, whatever decision you make, you'll never be the same again. And neither will I. With that, he turned away, leaving Mia alone in the room. The decision weighed heavily on her. But for the first time, she didn't feel invisible. She felt like she mattered. She felt like she had a choice. And that was everything. I know that Mia Harper had spent the last few days in a fog, unable to fully process what had happened. Her life had changed in ways she never imagined, and now she was standing at a crossroads, unsure of which path to take. Victor Romano's offer had left her with more questions than answers. What did it mean to truly be part of his world? Was she ready to leave behind everything she had known? As she sat in her small room, staring out the window, her thoughts kept drifting back to the moment when Victor had spoken to her in his office. His words echoed in her mind. You're more capable than you realize. For years, Mia had been overlooked, dismissed, and yet here she was, being offered a chance to change everything. But the weight of that decision pressed heavily on her chest. Could she handle the power that came with being part of his world? Could she trust herself? The world outside seemed so far away, but Mia's mind was focused on one thing, the unknown. As the days passed, Mia found herself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. She couldn't stop thinking about Victor, his dark eyes, the way he had looked at her with such intensity. His calm demeanor had been unsettling, yet there had been something in his gaze that made her feel as though she were truly seen. No one had ever looked at her like that before. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that what Victor was offering was not just a job. It was a complete change in her life. Mia had always been a survivor, but now, she had the chance to thrive. She had the chance to prove to herself that she could be more than just a maid. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the city, Mia made up her mind. She wasn't going to run from this opportunity. She had worked too hard to get here. She had fought for so long just to survive. Now, it was time to step into the unknown. The next day, Mia arrived at the Romano estate early, the weight of her decision still fresh in her mind. As she entered the mansion, she could feel the difference in the air. There was a sense of anticipation, of something bigger about to unfold. Victor was already in the office, his presence filling the room. Mia took a deep breath and walked in. He looked up from his desk, his expression unreadable. You're here, he said, his voice calm. But there was something in it that made her heart skip a beat. I've been thinking about your offer, Mia began, her voice steady, though her nerves still lingered. And I've decided. I'm in. I want to be part of your world. I want to work with you. Victor's lips curled into a small smile, but his eyes remained serious. Good, he said simply. I knew you would make the right choice. For the first time in her life, Mia felt like she was on the brink of something extraordinary. She was no longer the invisible maid. She was someone with a purpose, someone with power, someone who had the chance to rewrite her own story. Victor stood up from his desk and walked over to her. He handed her a folder filled with documents. These are the contracts for the projects we'll be working on. You'll be involved in every decision from now on, he said, his voice firm. You'll have the power to make a difference, Mia. Don't waste it. Mia took the folder, feeling the weight of his words. As she looked up at him, she knew that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet understand. But for the first time, she felt ready. Ready to take control of her future. Ready to prove that she was more than just a maid. As she left the office, the folder in her hands, Mia couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. She was no longer a bystander in her own life. She was a player in a world that she had only ever dreamed of, and she was determined to make the most of it. I know that as Mia Harper walked through the corridors of the Romano estate the next morning, the weight of the decision she had made the previous day still hung heavy in the air. She could feel it in every step, every breath, as if she were crossing an invisible line, leaving behind everything she once knew. She was no longer just a maid, no longer just someone who cleaned the rooms and stayed out of the way. She was someone who was now part of a world that was so far removed from her previous life, a world filled with power, control, and influence. Mia was still trying to process what this meant for her, what this new position would entail. As she entered the office, Victor Romano was already there, his eyes scanning through the documents on his desk. His demeanor was calm, his posture commanding, but there was a shift in his energy that Mia couldn't ignore. It was as if he recognized that something had changed, that the girl who had once stayed in the background was now standing in front of him as an equal. Mia, he said without looking up, his voice as smooth as ever. Come in. She walked toward the desk, a quiet but determined step. The room was quiet, save for the soft rustle of paper. As Victor continued to review the files, it was as though he was waiting for her to speak, waiting for her to make the next move. Mia hesitated for a moment before speaking. I'm ready, she said, her voice steady, even though her heart was still racing. Ready to do whatever you need me to do. Victor finally looked up at her, his dark eyes studying her with a calm intensity. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was thick with anticipation, as though the weight of the moment was too much to put into words. Then, with a nod, Victor pushed a file across the desk toward her. I need you to go over these contracts, he said. You'll be involved in the decision-making process now. I trust you. Mia took the file in her hands, feeling the weight of it in her palms. She had never held something like this before, never been entrusted with such responsibility. As she flipped through the pages, she could feel her mind shifting into a new gear. This was no longer just about cleaning rooms or taking care of menial tasks. This was about strategy, about making decisions that would impact the future of the Romano Empire. She was part of that future now, and that was both thrilling and terrifying. I want you to pay close attention, Victor continued, his voice steady, yet there was an unmistakable seriousness in his tone. You'll be working closely with the team from now on. You'll be in the room during important meetings. I need someone I can trust, Mia? Someone who sees the bigger picture. Mia nodded, her mind racing. She knew that this was a test, not just of her abilities, but of her loyalty. If she wanted to prove herself in this world, she needed to show that she was capable of handling everything it demanded. I won't let you down, Mia replied, her voice firm. She knew this was the beginning of something much larger than herself. She wasn't just going to be a passive observer in this world. She was going to make an impact. Victor stood up from his desk, his gaze never leaving hers. I know you won't, he said, his voice soft but sincere. But remember, Mia, this world is full of risks. It's not like what you're used to. There are consequences. For everything. Mia understood the weight of his words. She had seen the power Victor wielded, the way his presence could change the course of a situation with just a glance. But she also knew that she was no longer just a bystander. She was a player now, and she was ready to step up. As Victor led her into the next meeting, she could feel the eyes of the others in the room shift to her. They had all been there before, seasoned players in the world of business and crime. But Mia was different. She wasn't just there to observe. She was there to contribute, to make her mark. And as the meeting went on, she found herself speaking up more and more, offering insights that made others stop and listen. She wasn't just the maid anymore. She was Mia Harper, a part of the Romano Empire. As the meeting ended and everyone filed out of the room, Victor gave her a look that said everything. You did well today, he said, his voice low but filled with approval. Mia felt a rush of pride swell inside her. She had done it. She had proven herself. And as she walked back to her office, she knew that this was just the beginning. She wasn't just part of Victor's world now. She was shaping it. And she wasn't going to stop. I know that as Mia Harper walked through the hallways of the Romano estate, she felt the weight of her new role pressing down on her. It had only been a week since she had made the decision to join Victor Romano's world, and every day felt like a new chapter in a life she never could have imagined for herself. She had come a long way from the quiet maid she once was. The transition had been anything but easy. The power and pressure of the new responsibilities weighed on her, but she knew this was the path she had chosen, and there was no turning back. Her first week in the office had been a whirlwind of meetings, phone calls, and late nights reviewing contracts. Victor had placed her in charge of a critical project, something that would influence the future of the Romano Empire. Mia knew that with this opportunity came the expectation of success, and failure was not an option. She had already proven herself once, but now it was time to show that she truly belonged. As Mia entered the conference room for another meeting, she could feel the eyes of the other executives on her. They still didn't fully understand why Victor had brought her in, why someone from a background like hers had been given such a critical role. But Mia wasn't fazed. She had earned her place at the table, and she would prove it every day. Victor sat at the head of the table, his usual calm and collected demeanor as imposing as ever. He didn't say much, but his presence was enough to command the room. Mia took her seat across from him, the weight of the documents she had prepared resting in her hands. "Mia," Victor said, his voice breaking the silence, "present the findings." She stood up, her heart pounding, but she pushed the nerves aside. This was her moment. She had prepared for this. As she spoke, explaining the financial projections and strategic decisions she had analyzed, she could feel the room's attention on her. The executives were no longer just skeptical, they were listening. Her words carried weight. Her insights were being taken seriously, and she could see the respect in their eyes, the same respect she had earned from Victor. "This will set the tone for the next quarter," Mia continued, pointing to the charts on the screen. "These numbers are solid, and if we follow this strategy, we can expect substantial growth. But we need to act quickly. The market won't wait." She could feel the eyes of the room on her, but she didn't falter. She had earned their attention, and she wasn't going to waste it. When she finished, the room was quiet for a moment. Then, one of the executives, John Hall, who had been particularly critical of her involvement in the project, spoke up. "Impressive," he said, his tone guarded but respectful. "You've done the math. I'll give you that." Mia nodded, acknowledging his words, but she didn't let the praise go to her head. She knew that this was just the beginning. She still had to prove herself to everyone in the room, and most importantly, to herself. Victor didn't say anything at first, but when he finally spoke, his words were simple yet powerful. "I agree," he said, his voice steady, but there was a slight edge to it. "This is exactly the kind of initiative I'm looking for." "Well done, Mia." For a moment, there was a silence in the room. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was filled with meaning. Mia had earned Victor's approval and the respect of the others in the room. It was a small victory, but it was hers. As the meeting ended and the executives filed out, Mia remained seated for a moment, letting the reality of what had just happened sink in. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was a force to be reckoned with in this world. And she had only just begun. Victor stood up, his eyes meeting hers. "You're doing well, Mia," he said, his voice softer than usual. "I knew I made the right choice." Mia felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear that until now. "Thank you," she said, her voice quiet but genuine. "I won't let you down." As Victor walked out of the room, Mia sat there for a few more moments, reflecting on everything that had happened. Her mind raced with all the possibilities ahead of her. She knew this was just the beginning, and there was so much more to accomplish. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had control of her future. She wasn't just a bystander in her own life. She was the one making the decisions, shaping her own destiny. As she stood up and walked toward her office, a smile tugged at the corners of her lips. This was only the start of her journey, and she was ready for whatever came next. I know that as Mia Harper stood in the grand conference room, she couldn't shake the feeling that her world had irrevocably shifted. Just a few weeks ago, she had been invisible, a mere maid in the eyes of the powerful men who now surrounded her. But now, as she prepared for another high-stakes meeting, she was no longer just a bystander. She had earned her place at the table, and she could feel the weight of that responsibility pressing down on her. Her new role came with new expectations, and though she was still adjusting to the whirlwind of power, influence, and decision-making, she knew one thing for sure: there was no going back. Today, she was about to present a major proposal that could alter the course of the Romano family's business dealings. The stakes were higher than they had ever been. The room was silent, filled with the tension of anticipation. Victor Romano, ever the picture of composure, sat at the head of the table. His sharp gaze swept across the room, his presence commanding the attention of everyone present. The usual cast of powerful executives, investors, and advisors filled the room, but today, their eyes were on Mia. As she walked to the front of the room, her heart pounded, but she pushed the nerves aside. This was her moment. As she set down the documents in front of her, Mia glanced up at Victor. He didn't smile, but there was something in his eyes, a glimmer of approval. It was subtle, but it was there. He was watching her, waiting to see what she could do. "Mia," Victor said, his voice low but filled with authority. "Present your proposal." Mia took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had worked tirelessly on this presentation, analyzing market trends, projections, and strategies. She was ready. As she began to speak, explaining her strategy and the potential for expansion into new markets, she could see the others in the room paying attention. No one interrupted. No one doubted her. It was as if they had all silently agreed to give her the respect she had earned. Mia spoke with confidence, her voice steady as she explained the details of her plan. She had studied every angle, accounted for every risk, and crafted a strategy that she truly believed could propel the Romano family's business into a new era. As she spoke, she noticed that Victor's gaze never wavered. His attention was fixed on her, and for the first time, she didn't feel like an outsider. She was in control. The room's atmosphere shifted as she continued, the executives now fully engaged in the conversation. Some were nodding, others scribbling notes, but no one was questioning her authority. For the first time, Mia felt like she had truly stepped into the role she was meant to play. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. The executives exchanged glances, and Mia could feel the tension building. Then, as if on cue, one of the senior advisors, Robert Clark, spoke up. "This is bold," he said, his tone guarded but respectful. "You've got the numbers to back it up, but there's a lot at stake." Mia met his gaze, unwavering. "I understand the risks," she said, her voice firm. "But sometimes, the greatest opportunities come with the greatest risks. We can't afford to stand still while our competitors move forward. This plan will secure our place at the top." There was a long pause before Robert spoke again. "I like your confidence," he said, nodding slowly. "I think you've got something here." Victor, who had been watching the exchange silently, finally spoke. "I agree," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. "We'll move forward with this. Mia, you've done well." The room was still. No one said a word, but Mia could feel the shift. The respect she had worked so hard to earn was now hers. As the meeting wrapped up, Mia found herself standing taller, a sense of pride swelling in her chest. She had done it. She had earned her place in this world. As she walked out of the room, the weight of the moment settled over her. The world she had stepped into was vast, filled with power, risks, and opportunities. But for the first time, Mia felt like she truly belonged. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She wasn't just a bystander. She was a player in the game, and nothing would ever be the same again. I know that Mia Harper sat at her desk that evening, staring at the files in front of her, the weight of the day settling over her. The meeting had gone well. Her proposal had been approved, and the respect she had earned from the executives in the room was palpable. But as she looked out the window, her mind couldn't help but wander. She had come so far in such a short amount of time. From the maid who cleaned the floors to the woman who now held the attention of the most powerful men in the room. It was surreal, and yet, it felt like she had always been meant for something more. The sound of footsteps interrupted her thoughts, and she turned to see Victor Romano standing in the doorway of her office. His presence filled the room, as it always did. He wasn't just a mafia boss, he was a force of nature. "Mia," he said, his voice calm, but there was an edge to it that caught her attention. "We need to talk." She stood up from her desk, feeling a flutter of nerves, but she quickly suppressed it. "Of course, Mr. Romano," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Victor stepped into the room, his dark eyes never leaving hers. "I've been keeping an eye on you," he said, his voice low. "You've done well, Mia. Better than I expected." She wasn't sure if that was praise or just a statement of fact, but she didn't let herself dwell on it. "Thank you," she replied, unsure of what else to say. Victor walked over to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "I've seen potential in you since the day you first stepped into this house. But there's more to this than just business deals and strategies. You're a part of something much bigger now, Mia." His words hung in the air, and Mia felt a chill run down her spine. She had always known there was more to Victor Romano's world than met the eye, but now it was becoming clear. She wasn't just playing in the business world. She was involved in something deeper, something more dangerous. "What do you mean?" Mia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Victor turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "I mean that you're not just an employee anymore. You're a part of this family, whether you like it or not. And that comes with responsibilities." Mia swallowed, unsure of what he was getting at. "Responsibilities?" she echoed. "What kind of responsibilities?" Victor's gaze softened, just for a moment, before hardening again. "The kind that go beyond spreadsheets and presentations. You've proven yourself in the office, Mia, but now you need to prove yourself in other ways." Mia's heart raced. She had no idea what he was talking about. She had already proven herself. She had earned her place, hadn't she? "What do you want me to do?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly despite her best efforts to keep it steady. Victor walked over to her, his movements deliberate and slow. "I need someone I can trust," he said, his voice quieter now. "Someone who understands the inner workings of this family. Someone who isn't afraid to make tough decisions. Are you that person, Mia?" His words hung in the air, and for a moment, Mia wasn't sure how to respond. She had never considered herself a part of the family, never thought of herself as someone who could be trusted with anything more than business matters. But now, Victor was offering her something bigger, something that could change everything. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes," Mia said, her voice steady despite the unease creeping up her spine. Victor studied her for a long moment before nodding. "Good. That's what I like to hear." He turned to leave the room, but then paused at the door. "One more thing," he said, looking back at her. "You're not just working for me anymore. You're working for the family. And that means loyalty comes first. Always." The door closed behind him with a soft click, and Mia stood there, alone in the quiet office. The weight of his words settled over her, and she couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just changed once again. She wasn't just a part of Victor's world now. She was part of something far deeper. As she sat back down at her desk, her mind raced. What had she gotten herself into? What did loyalty to the family really mean? The power she had tasted just days ago now felt different, heavier, more consequential. But as the darkness outside deepened, Mia knew one thing for certain. There was no turning back. She was in this world now, and whether she was ready or not, she would have to learn how to navigate it. Mia leaned back in her chair, her fingers tracing the edge of the papers in front of her. She had a decision to make, and she was going to make it count. I know that Mia Harper spent the next few days in a daze, her mind still trying to process everything Victor had said. The weight of his words lingered, the promise of loyalty and the unspoken responsibilities pressing down on her shoulders. The world she had entered was vast and complicated, and Mia was beginning to understand just how much she would have to change to survive in it. She had been a part of the Romano family business for weeks now, but it still felt surreal. Every decision, every interaction, seemed to carry more weight than it ever had before. It was a constant battle to stay ahead, to prove that she belonged. The expectations were high, and Mia had learned quickly that the stakes were always higher than she had imagined. Late one afternoon, as she worked through another set of contracts in her office, there was a knock on the door. Mia glanced up, a little surprised. She hadn't expected anyone. "Come in," she called, her voice steady. The door opened, and to her surprise, it was Victor Romano. He stepped inside, his usual air of authority filling the room as he closed the door behind him. "Mia," he said, his tone serious but not unfriendly. "We need to talk." Mia stood up immediately, her heart picking up pace. The last time he had said those words, everything had changed. "Of course, Mr. Romano," she replied, trying to mask the nervousness in her voice. Victor motioned to the chair across from her desk. "Sit down," he said, and Mia complied, her mind racing. What could this be about? Had she done something wrong? Had she missed a critical detail? "I've been watching you closely," Victor said, his gaze steady and calculating. "You've handled the pressure well. You're quick, smart, and you're learning the ropes faster than I expected. But there's something more you need to understand." Mia felt her pulse quicken, but she stayed quiet, waiting for him to continue. "The Romano family is not just about business. It's about loyalty, connections, and trust," Victor continued, his voice firm but not unkind. "You've proven yourself to me in meetings and negotiations, but there's a different side to this world, and I need to know you can handle it." Mia nodded, unsure of where he was going with this, but determined to listen. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling inside her. Victor looked at her for a long moment, then slowly stood up and walked toward the window, his hands behind his back. "I've decided it's time for you to learn about the real power in this business," he said, his voice quiet but filled with meaning. "You've been working in the background, but now it's time for you to step into a more visible role." Mia's mind raced. What did he mean by real power? She had already been thrust into high-stakes decisions, working alongside people she had never imagined interacting with, let alone collaborating with. But the look on Victor's face told her this was something different, something deeper. "You want me to take on more responsibility?" Mia asked carefully, her eyes never leaving him. Victor turned to face her, his gaze unwavering. "Exactly. I want you to start taking on the role of someone who represents the Romano family, someone who stands for what we've built, someone who can navigate both the business side and the personal side of things." Mia frowned slightly, trying to process what he was saying. "Personal side?" she echoed. Victor's lips tightened slightly, his expression serious. "This world is not just about contracts and meetings. There are other people who want to take what we've built. People who can be dangerous. People who don't follow the same rules we do. That's where you come in." Mia's breath caught in her throat. What was he saying? Was she being asked to do something she wasn't ready for? "What do you want me to do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Victor stepped closer, his eyes locked onto hers. "I want you to learn the balance. The balance between power and control, between trust and manipulation. You'll be shadowing me for the next few weeks, learning how to deal with the people who make the real decisions." Mia nodded slowly, her heart pounding. She had always known that the business world was complicated, but this was something else entirely. Victor was asking her to step into a role where trust was just as important as strategy, where alliances were built on something more than just money and contracts. "This won't be easy," Victor continued, his voice low. "You'll see things, hear things, and have to make decisions that might not be comfortable. But you need to understand that loyalty is everything in this world. The people who are loyal to us, who are loyal to me, are the ones who survive. And I need to know that you can be that person." Mia swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling over her. She had always been someone who stayed in the background, who avoided the complicated webs of power and influence. But now, she was being asked to dive right into the heart of it all. "I understand," she said, her voice steady despite the storm of thoughts racing through her mind. Victor nodded, his expression softening just slightly. "Good. I know you'll be ready. You've already proven yourself. Now it's time to show you what comes next." As he turned to leave the room, Mia sat there for a long moment, processing everything he had said. Her life had changed, and now, it was time to truly step into her new role. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was a part of the Romano family, and she would have to navigate the complexities of this world if she wanted to survive. Mia had always wanted more, and now she had it. But with that came new responsibilities, and she would have to face the challenges head-on. There was no turning back now. She was in this world for good. I know that Mia Harper walked into the Romano estate's grand hall that morning, the echo of her footsteps on the marble floor a reminder of just how much had changed in her life. She had spent the past few weeks shadowing Victor, learning the intricacies of his world, and now, for the first time, she was about to make a decision that would shape her future. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on her shoulders as she stood at the threshold of a new chapter. Victor had told her to come to the meeting early, which was unusual. He was always punctual, always in control, so the fact that he wanted her to arrive before anyone else made her feel the shift in the air. As she made her way toward the conference room, she passed familiar faces, executives, advisors, people who now knew her name and had come to respect her contributions. They all nodded in acknowledgement as she walked past, but no one spoke. She was no longer the invisible maid. She had become a fixture in this world. Victor was already in the room when she arrived. He was seated at the head of the long table, looking over a set of documents. His usual calm presence seemed even more imposing today. As Mia entered, he looked up from the papers and motioned for her to sit down. "You're early," he said, his tone neutral but with a hint of approval. "Good." Mia sat across from him, her heart beating a little faster than usual. "I wanted to talk to you about something important," Victor continued, his eyes studying her closely. "You've been doing well, Mia." "Very well." Mia nodded, unsure where this conversation was headed. "Thank you," she replied. "But I know you're capable of more. That's why I'm bringing you in on something that requires more than just business acumen." Mia raised an eyebrow. She had thought she had already proven herself with the proposals, with the meetings, but now, Victor was telling her there was something more she needed to learn. "What do you mean?" she asked, keeping her voice steady despite the anxiety that was starting to bubble up inside her. Victor leaned forward slightly, his gaze never leaving hers. "I want you to learn the personal side of this business. The side that's about loyalty, alliances, and sometimes navigating the gray areas." Mia's stomach tightened. She had already seen enough to understand that the world Victor inhabited wasn't always as straightforward as it seemed. There were always hidden motives, hidden agendas, and things that couldn't be discussed in the open. But Victor's next words made it clear, this was a different kind of responsibility. "You've been in the room for the meetings, Mia, but now I need you to understand the people who are behind the deals. The ones who pull the strings from behind the scenes," he said, his voice low and measured. "You'll be meeting with them. You'll be making decisions that have consequences far beyond what you've seen so far." Mia felt a wave of uncertainty, but she didn't let it show. She had come this far, and she wasn't going to let fear stop her now. "I'm ready," she said, her voice firm. Victor nodded, clearly satisfied with her response. "Good. You'll start by meeting with a few key individuals who represent our interests. People who, at first glance, may seem like allies, but you'll quickly learn that loyalty is never as simple as it seems." He handed her a file filled with names and addresses. "These are the people you'll be dealing with. Study them, understand their motivations, and when you meet them, remember one thing. Nothing is ever as it seems." Mia took the file from him, her fingers brushing against his as she did. She could feel the weight of the task he was handing her. This wasn't just about numbers or deals anymore. This was about navigating a complex web of relationships and power dynamics. "I won't let you down," Mia said, her voice steady, but inside, her mind was already racing with questions. "I know you won't," Victor replied, his expression softening slightly. "That's why I'm giving you this responsibility. But remember, Mia, in this world, there are no guarantees. You need to be prepared for anything." As she left the conference room, the file clutched tightly in her hands. Mia felt a sense of determination building inside her. This was the next step in her journey. She had entered this world with little more than the hope of a better life. But now, she was learning that in order to survive here, she would need to be sharp, strategic, and most importantly, ruthless. She wasn't just here to make deals. She was here to understand the people who made the decisions, the ones who held the real power. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, late nights, and uncomfortable conversations. Mia met with people who spoke in riddles, who hid their true intentions behind carefully chosen words. She learned quickly that nothing was ever as simple as it seemed. There were always layers, always hidden agendas, and Mia was forced to confront the reality of what she had gotten into. She had to learn how to read people, how to understand what motivated them, and how to use that knowledge to her advantage. As she stood in front of the mirror one evening, preparing for another meeting with a powerful ally of the Romano family, Mia realized just how much she had changed. She wasn't the same woman who had stepped into Victor's world just a few short weeks ago. She was stronger now, more confident, and more capable of navigating the complexities of the life she had chosen. There was no going back. She was in this world for good, and she would learn to thrive in it, no matter the cost. I know that Mia Harper was beginning to feel the full weight of the world she had stepped into. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of meetings, new responsibilities, and lessons in loyalty. She had been thrust into the deeper layers of the Romano family business, where power, influence, and strategic decisions played out behind closed doors. The lessons were harsh, but they were necessary. Mia had learned that the stakes were higher than she had ever imagined, and there was no room for mistakes. The decisions she made now affected more than just spreadsheets or business deals. They affected people's lives, alliances, and futures. Mia had spent countless hours studying the people around her, learning what made them tick, understanding their motivations, and figuring out how she could use that information to her advantage. But now, as the days passed, she was starting to realize that this world wasn't just about knowledge or strategy. It was also about survival. And survival meant keeping your enemies close and your allies closer. She had been given a new project, one that would test everything she had learned. She was to lead a high-profile negotiation with a rival family, one that could either solidify their power or fracture their influence permanently. The meeting was set for the following day, and Mia had been preparing for it meticulously. The rival family, known for their cutthroat tactics, had made a name for themselves in the industry, and Mia knew that this negotiation could change everything for the Romano family. If it went well, they could secure their dominance in the market. If it went wrong, there could be consequences that reached far beyond business. Mia had been tasked with preparing the strategy and handling the details of the negotiation. She spent the night going over the documents, analyzing the rival family's weaknesses, and refining her approach. As she sat at her desk, the clock ticking in the background, she couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. Not long ago, she had been cleaning the same estate she now controlled, working in the shadows, unnoticed. Now, she was at the forefront of decisions that could make or break the Romano Empire. As the hours passed, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that this meeting was more than just a business transaction. It was a test of her loyalty, her strategy, and her ability to survive in this ruthless world. She had already proven herself in the office, but this was different. This was personal. She knew that if she failed, it wouldn't just be her job on the line. It would be her place in the family. Mia stood up and walked over to the window, staring out at the city below. The skyline shimmered in the moonlight, a reminder of the power and influence the Romano family held. But that power wasn't guaranteed. It could be lost in an instant. And Mia knew that. If she wanted to keep it, she had to be sharper, more decisive, and more ruthless than ever before. The next day, the negotiation was set to begin. Mia arrived early at the meeting location, a luxurious penthouse that overlooked the city. As she entered the room, she was greeted by the rival family's representatives, who were already seated at the table. Their expressions were cold, calculating, and untrusting. Mia took a deep breath, trying to keep her nerves in check. She wasn't just representing the Romano family now. She was representing herself. The meeting started, and Mia quickly took control. She presented the terms clearly, outlining the benefits for both sides and emphasizing the importance of collaboration. But as the conversation progressed, she could feel the tension building. The rival family wasn't interested in compromise. They were looking for a power play. As the negotiation became more heated, Mia found herself relying on everything Victor had taught her. The importance of understanding the unspoken, reading the room, and knowing when to push and when to pull back. She noticed subtle gestures, fleeting glances, and small shifts in body language that told her more than the words being spoken. Mia had learned that in this world, words were just a facade. It was the things left unsaid that held the most power. As the rival family pushed for unreasonable terms, Mia didn't back down. She countered every demand with calm precision, keeping the negotiation on track and ensuring that the Romano family's interests were protected. The hours ticked by, and the tension in the room grew thick. But Mia didn't falter. She held her ground, her eyes never leaving the faces of the rival family's representatives. She knew they were testing her, trying to see if she would crack. But she was no longer the scared woman who had walked into Victor's world months ago. She was someone who understood the game, and she was ready to play it. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the rival family relented. The terms were agreed upon, and the deal was made. Mia had won. As she left the meeting, her heart was still racing, but she couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. She had done it. She had successfully navigated the negotiation, secured the Romano family's position, and proved to herself that she was capable of handling the most difficult challenges. But as she stepped out of the penthouse and into the cool night air, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that the real test was only just beginning. She had made it this far, but the road ahead was still uncertain. The world she had entered was unforgiving, and the stakes were always rising. Mia knew that if she wanted to survive, she would have to keep evolving, keep adapting, and most of all, keep her eyes on the future. She wasn't done yet. She was just getting started. I know that as Mia Harper walked through the Romano estate's grand entrance that evening, she couldn't shake the sense of anticipation that filled the air. It had been weeks since the negotiation with the rival family, and the decision she had made in that moment still lingered with her. She had proven herself capable, more than capable, of navigating the complex world she had entered. But the realization was starting to settle in. This world wasn't one you could simply step in and out of. It was all-encompassing. As she made her way to her office, she noticed the change in how people greeted her. There was a new respect in their eyes, a new acknowledgement that she was no longer just the maid. She was someone they had to reckon with. But with that recognition came an undercurrent of unease, and Mia could feel it every time she walked into a room. She had earned her place, but it was clear that it wasn't enough to simply prove she was smart. In this world, loyalty was everything. And loyalty, she was quickly learning, came with a price. As Mia entered her office, the weight of her thoughts lifted slightly. It was a small sanctuary amidst the chaos, a place where she could focus, away from the eyes of the others. She sat down at her desk, staring at the papers in front of her. The next few weeks would be critical. The Romano family's rivals were already making moves in the market, and Mia had to ensure that the Romano family stayed one step ahead. She couldn't afford to make any mistakes. The sound of the door opening behind her broke her thoughts, and Mia turned to see Victor standing in the doorway. He was as composed as ever, but today, there was something different in his eyes. "Mia," he said, his voice steady but with an edge of urgency. "We need to talk." Mia stood up, her heart skipping a beat. "Of course," she said, keeping her tone even despite the rush of adrenaline coursing through her. Victor stepped inside, his gaze never leaving hers. "I've been watching you," he began, his words measured. "You've done well. But there's something else I need from you." Mia's stomach tightened. She had been waiting for this moment. But now that it was here, she felt the pressure of it more than she expected. "What do you need?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Victor's gaze softened slightly, but the weight of his words still carried. "There's a meeting tomorrow, one that could change everything for us," he said. "You'll be representing the family. I want you to be in the room, handling the negotiations." Mia's heart raced. This was the next step, the one she had been preparing for. It was her chance to prove, once again, that she was more than just a bystander in this world. "I'll be ready," she replied, her voice steady despite the nervous excitement building inside her. Victor nodded. "Good," he said. "But there's something else. This meeting isn't just about business. It's about trust, loyalty, and our position in the world. The people you'll be meeting are as dangerous as they are influential. They won't hesitate to test your resolve. You'll have to make decisions quickly, and sometimes, those decisions won't be easy." Mia nodded, understanding the gravity of what Victor was saying. She had already learned that in this world, nothing was as it seemed. But this was different. The stakes were higher now. "I won't let you down," she said, her voice firm. Victor gave her a look that seemed to assess her, as if measuring her readiness. After a long moment, he spoke again. "I know you won't. But remember, Mia, this world isn't just about making deals. It's about controlling everything, from the smallest details to the biggest risks. Do you understand?" Mia didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said, meeting his gaze. "I understand." Victor nodded once more, his expression softening just slightly. "You've come far, Mia. Don't forget who you are and why you're here. This is your chance to prove you can handle what's coming next. Make it count." As he turned to leave the room, Mia felt the weight of his words settle on her shoulders. She wasn't just representing herself anymore. She was representing the Romano family, their power, their future. And with that responsibility came the realization that she was no longer just a player in this world. She was a key part of it. The next morning, Mia arrived at the meeting location, a sleek, modern building that was far more imposing than any of the others she had visited. Inside, the air was thick with tension, the kind of tension that only a high-stakes meeting could create. Mia was introduced to the people who would be part of the negotiation. They were sharp, calculating, and not the type to make deals easily. As the meeting progressed, Mia kept her focus. She had prepared for this, studied every angle, every move the rival family might make. But she quickly realized that this wasn't just about business. It was about power, control, and trust. The rival family tried to test her, probing for weaknesses, trying to get a reaction. But Mia was ready. She stood firm, holding her ground, her eyes never leaving the people across the table. With every passing moment, she could feel herself stepping deeper into this world, gaining more control, more power. The negotiation was long, intense, and at times, grueling. But in the end, Mia had secured a deal that not only protected the Romano family's interests, but also solidified her position within the family. As the meeting concluded, Victor gave her a look of quiet approval. "Well done," he said, his voice low but sincere. "You did exactly what needed to be done." Mia felt a rush of pride swell in her chest. She had done it. She had proven herself once again. And as she walked out of the meeting, she couldn't help but feel that she was no longer the same woman who had walked into this world months ago. She had learned the game, and now, she was ready to play it on her own terms.